We have the very unenviable position of going last and standing in between all of you and some food and drinks. So thank you for paying attention. And thank you to all of you for being here. Before we get into it, I know we're all in violent agreement about the need, and I think this is really the how and the million to billion dollar questions that hopefully you've all been waiting for. I'd love for you all to just do a brief introduction of who you are and really what your company is looking for in terms of your portfolio currently. Doug, why don't we start with you?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Doug Faunce, I'm with AbbVie. Came into AbbVie through the acquisition of Allergan 3 years ago. I currently have 2 roles at AbbVie. The first is I spend 100% of my time as the head of search and evaluation on the BD side for eye care, and I spend 40% of my time with the AbbVie Ventures group. So yes, that's corporate math. And yeah, glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Doug.
Todd, Brady. I'm the CEO of Aldeyra Therapeutics. We're a clinical stage biotechnology company. We're public. One of our programs is in dry eye disease, and we have partnered that product with AbbVie. It's super awkward that you're on this panel with me. So my comments will be stilted and short as a result of that, but I am thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Céline?
So I am Céline Olmiere. I'm the head of Therapies Innovation, and Therapies Innovation is a business development arm of Théa. So the goal is to fulfill the pipeline of Théa with new products.
Excellent. Mike?
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Rosco, and I'm an ophthalmologist. And we have arrived at what my friends who run panels all the time call the death hour. So we're going to get you through this. And my breath smells like coffee.
Thanks, Mike. I can attest.
I'm sorry.
Todd, the first question is for you. So understanding that you do have an active NDA right now and that you are potentially the next approval in dry eye, I'd love to get your thoughts on the following. As a startup in the dry eye market space, leveraging emerging technologies to address this large unmet need in the market, how do you differentiate yourself from existing therapies?
Okay, so Stewart emailed me this question, so I ChatGPT'd it. And the answer is, are you ready for this? As a startup in the dry eye space, leveraging emerging technologies, you can differentiate yourself by highlighting the innovative approach you're taking.
Oh, perfect.
So that's pretty much what I was going to say. I mean,
He really did ChatGPT, and I can actually see it
I have it
there.
right here. I just copied your email right in the ChatGPT. But I think that's so true, and I bet Doug would agree. You have to differentiate yourself, for sure. For our dry eye product, we're trying to change the paradigm from weeks to minutes in terms of activity and sitting at the very top, the inflammatory cascade and an NCE and so many different things. But I think ChatGPT is basically right. It's all about differentiation.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone else on the panel have a more specialized, less AI-heavy answer to this question? So AI is
there
the
you
future.
go.
We've come full
We really don't
circle.
need this panel. I think we can just ChatGPT the rest.
AI did our homework.
Yes.
Yeah, as the only millennial in the room from the beginning, I can tell you that I'm still terrified of the technology replacing us. So Céline, as a large strategic with existing traditional dry eye treatments, how do you assess, and Théa, the potential of new technologies from startups in the dry eye space?
We ask ChatGPT. No, it's not an easy question in dry eye because, as you know, there's a lot of questions. You have to ask yourself what market you want to address, because you know that it's not the same market in Europe and in US.
Yep.
What kind of patient? Because as you all heard all the day, the etiology is different. There's plenty of subtype of dry eye. So do you want one product for all type? Do you want specific one? So ideally, you have plenty of model on all type of dry eye, and everything is positive. So it's the easy way, but it's not like that most of the time. So it's a tough question for this specific pathology, or you have to choose one subset of patients.
Yeah. It seems acutely this year and last year this question is more burning, right, given the space we're in. Doug, I wonder if you have something to expand on what Céline said.
Yeah, I think because as a company we come at innovation, whether it's in dry eye or any of the other ophthalmic or other therapeutic area domains, we come at it from really from two different angles. I mentioned AbbVie Ventures we have. So with regard to investment, really at the very early stage, where you're talking about startups, like true startups that are, just coming out of stealth, sometimes even just going into stealth, and up through seed and Series A level, which I know some of you are at. We really think about, how we look at it is really with two things in mind. One, does it fundamentally change the way we think about the science and the data that we're generating? And two, is it something that enables us to do science differently than we're doing today? So it's really about evolution on that early venture stage. When we're looking at things from the business development perspective, I can break it down very simply into three categories. First and foremost is above and beyond differentiation, as Todd mentioned, does it work? And do you know how it works? Can you support how it works with pharmacology, right? Two, can we make it? It's great to have a therapeutic that does something wonderful, but can you actually manufacture it in a way that is sensical, economical, and conducive to the supply chain? And then three, ultimately, can we sell it? Is a product that will result with a label or data in Section 14 or something else that allows us to sell it in a way that truly sets it apart from current and emerging products. So that's how we think about it.
And perhaps is how do you register it? Because in
How
Europe,
do you register it?
Yeah,
Correct.
because in Europe you have seen a lot of failures. In US less, but you needed 4 clinical studies or 5 to demonstrate it.
This is a great point because it's, I think we all know it's a real challenge to I get to go back to, Mark used the word architect, right? To design a clinical program that enables registration across multiple markets. It's very, very challenging, especially in the ocular surface domain, because of how the endpoints are perceived and received by different agencies.
I'm getting PTSD listening to this.
I'm sure you are.
Just so you
I
know.
think you have a lot
Sorry,
of
Todd.
empathetic ears. in the
I wore a
audience.
tie for Todd today.
I know, I'm
just so
getting
you know.
flashbacks, so go ahead.
Perfect. Mike, as the only recently practicing physician, an avid coffee drinker on the panel, I am curious, how does your firsthand experience as a clinician treating patients inform your approach at Harrow to evaluating and integrating newly acquired assets into the company's portfolio, sort of ensuring alignment with both clinical efficacy and commercial viability?
By the way, I work for Harrow. I'm a regional medical director. I forgot to tell you that. That's a great question. And I come just from my training, from how my mom raised me. I come from the clinical, what does this mean for the patient? And so there's really two things, right? When you're looking at any sort of therapy, MOA, it's number one, patient experience, number two, clinical outcome. And patient experience being everything from tolerability to onset of therapy. Does this seamlessly integrate into their life? So there's that. And then in terms of clinical effectiveness, we want to be able to metricize a hopefully healing ocular surface, whether it's TCFS, tear generation, that new tear surface area idea, tear breakup surface area. I love that. I'd never heard of that before. So those two things stick in my mind. Obviously we exist we're material girls in a material world, and we have to kind of figure out how to blend these two intents together, but I am more focused on the former.
Perfect. Doug, what key attributes and advancements in emerging dry eye therapies do you look for when thinking of acquisitions or partnerships, right? Are there any specific mechanisms of action that currently are attractive to you, or is there anything you could give the folks in the audience looking to develop in this space some words of wisdom on how to think about mechanisms of actions as they're looking to come into the ocular surface space?
Yeah, with regard to mechanisms, so as a company, our strategy, we're we're relatively mechanism agnostic, right? We're open to virtually any mechanism that is new and novel, that takes us from, where we started with cyclosporin, not only through today, but into the future. And really, I think what we're seeing is that, we saw a panel of, half a dozen or so companies today, right? All very unique and distinct on their own, all different mechanisms. Every single one of those has a shot. But they also are all addressing, in some ways, very different segments of the disease. We're seeing dry eye become very segmented in terms of how it's diagnosed, how it's treated, and I think that's where we're going to end up. And so the mechanisms seem to be really tailored to addressing those different components and different segmentations of the disease, whether it's the inflammatory component that Victor spoke about, or the non-inflammatory component, whether it's meibomian gland disease, whether it's, mucins or what have you. It's not so much about finding a new mechanism as it is driving towards whatever is underlying that type of disease.
Céline, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree. Whatever the mode of action, what you want is efficacy and safety.
Yeah. Mike, what about you and Harrow?
Yes, beautifully stated. And that was going to be one of my responses was, it's a really exciting time right now where there's so many different biomarkers being tested that have never been tested before. And so many different therapies that respond to these certain biomarkers that we're seeing in different types of dry eye disease. And I think it's good to balance excitement and enthusiasm with pragmatism, because we don't have enough information yet. So going to what am I going to do in the patient in the chair right now, what excites me a little bit more, or as much excitement as the upcoming, and it will eclipse, the excitement will eclipse when we have these subgroups and we have the biomarker that we just address and everything's wonderful. But what does really excite me right now is delivery mechanism, where we have these drugs that we've known for a long time, we know their safety profile, cyclosporin, and yet with new delivery mechanisms, you're seeing concentrations of this therapeutic ingredient that you've never seen before in the eye. So I'm as excited about the delivery as I am the specific kind of precision medicine that we're aiming for. And I'd say probably more excited now for the former, more excited later for the latter.
I just, in listening to you talk, I reminded of Laura Perriman's talk in the beginning, and she was making the comparison that dry eye is like having a bunch of animals with the lights turned off. You don't know if it's elephants or aardvarks or hippopotamus or what have you, right? And I'm wondering, from your perspective as a clinician, is there anything that she made the comment of, you use the newest therapy to treat your worst patient. Is there anything from the clinician side that you can think of from a mechanism of action standpoint in this polypharmacy approach that you would like to see or not?
I think it all goes back to the physical exam and what you can yield on that physical exam. Never underestimate the physical exam. In that regard, when you have those difficult to treat dry eye patients that have kind of gone through the gamut of treatment, that's a great question. And your question was specifically, what do you do with those patients? Do you try? Yes, absolutely. You try the new stuff if their insurance allows it and if it's accessible to them. At this point, yes, because we don't have all of the specific biomarkers mapped out, and we don't have all of the specific mechanisms mapped out.
Yeah, perfect.
Stewart, can we go back, because you asked about attributes,
Yeah.
right? And specifically attributes that drive our interest for investment or anyone else's interest for investment. And I think one of the most important set of attributes is the robustness of the development plan, really, right? Of the development program, right out of the gate. There's a tendency to want to, when you have a little bit of supportive data, just jump right to phase 3.
Yeah.
I understand. It's a biotech world. Funding is very difficult. Folks want to get to phase 3 because getting through phase 3 is what it's all about.
Yeah.
But if we look historically, there are a plethora of programs that have not progressed successfully from phase 2 to phase 3. And you end up in a cycle where you're chasing endpoints and chasing endpoints and chasing endpoints because you didn't take the time to learn what you needed to learn about the pharmacokinetics, the chosen dosing schedule, the concentrations, the formulations, to ensure that you can do a phase 2 program that demonstrates reproducibility in that phase 2 program, so that going from phase 2 to phase 3, your PTRS goes from here to here. And then a company like us is much more compelled to want to partner on something with a much higher PTRS that's just underwritten by robust data.
Yeah.
Those are you can't underestimate the importance of those attributes that you develop early in your development program.
Yeah.
Don't skip them.
Get as
Todd.
much data as you can.
Just
It's
gonna
so funny
ask.
listening to my colleagues talk, I must say, because I've been meeting with these companies, and let me give you a little tip if you're meeting with companies. First of all, ask them what they're interested in, because it really depends on the company. I think a bigger company, it's more about mass market appeal, it's about pricing, it's about novelty. With the smaller companies, and I've had conversations with each of your colleagues, Susan and Mark, it's more about can I appeal to my current patient population? It's more specialty product oriented. So whenever I met with a company, I tried to figure out first what do they want to hear, and then I just told them that because I'm sure all of your products will in some way could be differentiated along the lines that appeal to a company in that way. So, not that I ever did that with you guys in my 400 meetings with you. No. Yeah.
He's not faceless. He's got a soul, and he's actually, he's for the patient too.
That's right.
We've had side conversations that I just revealed. They're supposed to be secret, now they're not. So yeah, he does care.
You guys are beating me to the punch.
Go for it, go.
So this question is for all of you, and it's really about, I think, what you're touching on. And Todd, I think you're in the enviable position as to a lot of the folks in the audience would be like to be where you are, right? Which is all about sort of collaboration, right? And how is it, I wonder, that you all view, there are a lot of startups in this audience, there are a lot of people sort of along this pathway, right? Looking to be eventually acquired. And I'm wondering, how can collaboration both between startups and strategics, and at what point does that collaboration begin, right? Help big companies become more innovative and competitive, making it easier both for them to find and buy groundbreaking technologies to accelerate the development and commercialization of innovative treatments, optimizing speed to market, right? And I'd love for each of you to answer, and you can choose the order in which you do so.
I always recommend starting early, talking to companies. And I used to be on the investment side. Now I always told my companies, I want a partnership. I want some third-party validation. And I think often small companies get super picky about that relationship. I don't think you should be picky.
Yeah.
I think that validation is important. I used to tell people, I want Merck, I want Pfizer, I want BMS. The best would be AbbVie. Not everyone get AbbVie.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's what I want because, the earlier the better.
Perfect. Céline?
Yeah, so we sign partnership quite early compared to big companies. So we want a real partnership because, of course, the startup knows the molecule more than we do.
Yeah.
They know more their technology than we do. So we want them to conduct the development until phase 1, 2, depends. And of course, we provide funds, tips, advice, and we want at least to do the phase 3, because you know that when you are close to the market and registration, you need to involve everybody. So we want to perform the phase 3, but before that, we are quite open.
And how interactive, so given, I'm interested, Doug, in the answer for you versus Théa, right, which is that you're looking to get in early, and how collaborative is that relationship throughout the clinical development pathway?
We hope it will be a real partnership, so we discuss on the development plan, on protocols, on the results, on everything. So we want a true relationship with them. We are not just funders or VC.
Yeah. Doug, what about you?
Yeah, so just for clarification, I mean, we also come in very early on the BD side as well, not just on the venture side. We have, for example, partnerships in ophthalmic gene therapy. Right now, they're purely conceptual. I mean, we're developing things together, right? And I think there are a couple of aspects to the collaboration and ultimately getting it through successfully. I totally echo early and often, but in addition to that, there are two things that I think are important. One is make sure that you develop a clear understanding between yourselves and the prospective partner of what you each bring to the table in terms of knowledge base, in terms of expertise, in terms of technical capabilities you might have back at your shop versus what we as a large pharma company can bring, and work to understand how those two come together as one. And then the other part is, don't be shy. I mean, these discussions are all held under CDA. I think I speak for most of us on the large cap pharma side, where we take your confidential information just as seriously as we take our own. And the more that we share that openly under the proper terms and environment is really where we learn from one another. And that's how it all boils down to, those things all boil down to trust between you and the prospective partner, who ultimately becomes your partner. And you have to have that trust in place for the collaboration to carry all the way through to the end, to whatever the exit point is, an acquisition, if it's an option deal or a strategic collaboration. You have to develop that trust early, and it really has to be strong.
Mike?
That was great.
I would say don't desperate, because sometimes we have plenty of conversation before signing a deal. Sometimes it even took 5-10 years.
Oh, wow.
Because some of them came very early.
Right.
They have almost nothing, and then they have animal data, and then they have GMP material, GLP studies. So it could take time, but continue to interact with strategics.
I wonder, for the inverse of the question, is there anything you would say to watch out for or not do, right, as they're looking to be collaborative in startups working with larger companies? Is there anything you'd say steer clear of?
Not oversell your data, not lie.
Yeah.
My new boss, not old boss, he sent me something that was very powerful. And of course, my phone's across the room, but essentially it was like preclinical studies with a very small n, or even clinical studies with a small to reasonable n, does not mean that the therapeutic efficacy is anywhere going to help the patient. So that's what I would say is like, again, and I'm like the most excitable guy in the world. You have to temper your excitement in terms of these studies and really get more and more long-term information under the guise that you're financially constrained and you need to sort of move through this process in an efficient way.
Yeah, and I would just, to put that another way, I think, don't oversell it.
I was going to say that.
You want to say it again?
Okay, don't oversell.
Yeah, don't oversell it.
Notwithstanding my prior comments.
I think it's important to be very grounded in what your data actually say or imply, because that's how we're going to look at it. We come in from a very data-centric perspective, but I agree with everything you said.
These are relationships built on trust, as Doug said. How many years have we known each other? 10 years, more than that?
At least.
Stephen Benton I've known for more than 10 years.
We're going to like 10 minutes.
You guys
so
are
it's
just
pretty good.
an hour or so. But it really is meeting after meeting and relationship building. And the first 400 times we met, I don't know that there was any hint of a relationship between our companies. But over time, these things evolve. And really, I think in biotech, it's a matter of persistence.
Yeah, those are all great. I have one more question for you all. And feel free to answer this as well in the order that speaks to you. Todd, maybe you can go before Doug so he doesn't steal your answer
He
this time.
just likes to do that.
Yeah. What are the primary factors and considerations guiding your investment decisions when looking to invest in a dry eye startup?
Well, we looked at quite a few dry startups when I was on the investment side. For us back then, though, it was more about being first to market. I mean, there was no Xiidra. There was
Yeah.
Restasis, but we
Right.
knew we needed something other than cyclosporin. I guess that's another form of differentiation. I think the other thing is capital efficiency for investors. So you can't go out and say, I need $100 million, or even with partners, really. I think you have to come up with a targeted, focused clinical plan that's a reasonable amount of money in a reasonable period of time to demonstrate a p-value of less than 0.05.
Céline and Doug?
I said your answer, didn't I?
It's true. But in our case, we don't do investment only. We want some territorial rights because we want a product on the market in the end. So it's a little bit different. But yes, the idea is to know how to how to develop it, register it, and is there a market for that? So.
I have one more. I lied. That was my penultimate question. Is there any other advice you would give startups? And Todd, I can think of a conversation you and I actually had about this as it relates to succeeding in dry eye innovation. You know, what does that look like? Not even just from the partnership that you potentially end up with, but along that clinical development pathway. You know, we've been lucky to work with Aldeyra for a very long time. You guys have been a very loyal customer. But I wonder if you have any words, or any of you, about what speed to market innovation might look like, and how you'd think about that even ahead of the long-term play, which is we want to be bought, but in that process, how are we going to be efficient with sort of getting to that point?
Mm-hmm. I would just like to say publicly that we are not in it to get bought. We might get bought, but that is good companies are bought, they're not sold. What did I say when we were talking about it? Did I say
so
something?
I'm going to give you your
No.
answer.
I think, and I've heard this with many of the presentations earlier today, differentiation even in your clinical plan, I think, is attractive.
Yep.
As long as it results in something that's interesting, you know, that the FDA signed on to and so forth. And we happen to be big fans of the chamber because it allows us to demonstrate activity within minutes, which is where I think the space needs to go. We need to move from weeks to minutes. And it's important to consider other novel approaches. I love the diagnostic approaches and so forth, but I think that's maybe one thing that you can think about with your CRO, and importantly, your statisticians in generating a positive result.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
I'll just add, yeah, so with regard to differentiation, right? I mean, we talk about differentiation, it's like, you know, every 10th word out of our mouths in this industry. And I think it's important that you think about differentiation, not just about what the current marketed product is. You know, it's not just about how you differentiate against Restasis or against Xiidra. It's about how you're thinking about differentiation for your product or your asset against things that are in the clinic already and have some early data. How you think your product differentiates from what the rest of the phase 3 landscape looks like. Because if you're 2 years behind what that next product is, you have to be thinking ahead in terms of differentiation, not necessarily thinking about how it differentiates from Xiidra or Restasis. We already know that.
I think those are great points. I pride myself of being very punctual, and we just ran down to 0. So I would like to thank you all for your participation and thank all of you for coming to be here.
Thank you, everybody.